Not many people would probably agree with me on this one, but I actually think that Final Fantasy XIV and WoW Classic in particular are a lot closer to one another than many people probably give them credit for. And in this video, I want to explain my feelings, perhaps convince a few people that play FF14 to consider giving Classic WoW a chance. Right now is a great chance as well to get into the game because they've just released hardcore Classic WoW servers and there's so many streamers and players and everybody getting involved into the game again. So it's a really nice injection of player base and excitement and anticipation and just a really good energy and buzz that you can feel throughout the game. So now's a good time to check it out. But I know that Final Fantasy XIV is a very big story-driven MMORPG. It is the initial lens by which many people view the game. It is the driving force of convincing new players to get suckered into the game. People say, oh, the story is massive, it's expensive, it starts in 1.0, and there's this massive payoff at wherever the expansion, wherever it goes. Endwalker, I think, was a conclusion of the ultimate story that they've been building for the last 10 years, and it's so amazing for so many people. People say it's some of the best story they've ever experienced in any video game. And this is a big driving force that keeps people engaged in the game. And I want to say that Classic WoW can have very similar aspects to it. You just have to approach it in a very, well, in a slightly different way. But you can still have some really nice payoff and really have some nice world building and good lore, execution, and good story building. But I will warn you, you definitely won't have as big of a payoff in WoW Classic as you will in something like Final Fantasy XIV, but you can still enjoy the story in a great way. World of Warcraft Classic doesn't actually have this massive, overarching, expensive story that's going to have a big payoff at the culmination of, going into Blackwing Lair or something like that. It's not going to quite be the same sort of payoff. But with the help of an add-on, which I will help you set up so you can get prepared, with the use of this add-on, you can actually have a very similar feel.
Greetings, adventurer. I am Conservator Ilthalane. My purpose in Shadowglen is to ensure that the balance of nature is maintained. The spring rains were particularly heavy this year, causing some of the forest's beasts to flourish, while others suffered.
For Final Fantasy XIV, the way in which the story gets told is going from MSQ to MSQ, from NPC to NPC, getting a lot of heavy quest text, potential voice acting, and great cutscenes. And that is how you're engaged with the story. There's not a whole lot of leveling combat really in the grand scheme of things, but very much you are learning about the characters, the story, and why you're here in this world, what your place is in the grand scheme of things. Now in WoW Classic, it isn't like that, and that doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing, it's just different. So in WoW Classic, the way the story works is more so zone to zone. So when you're in Mulgore and you're starting as a Tauren, you are focused on the plight of the Taurens, why your ancestors brought you here, your enemies, your foes, who are you warring with, and what has your struggle been. And you meet a lot of different types of characters, from the Ventrico goblins to different Quillbore or gnolls to harpies. There's a whole bunch of different interactions you have with enemies and a lot of quests which will take you in these directions and tell you about why you're fighting these groups of people. Now, some of these stories, when you complete a zone, say like Mulgore, some of these stories will then take you into the Barrens, and some of that gets explored further. Some of it changes. You get an injection of new angles from orcs or undeads or troll characters, and there are a lot of new foes that might come into things and a lot of old foes that might be extinguished with. So instead of having this massive expensive story, what you instead get is zone to zone stories that are more isolated, yet still can be very interesting and still have some decent payoffs. And some of these zones are even culminating in a big dungeon that you can go and do, and the story can be interconnected there, such as the Defias in the Deadmines with Westfall and the story that's connected between them and Stormwind. And you can learn about the Van Cleefs and why they are, enemies of Stormwind and what your place is there in trying to defeat this foe. Now, the best way that I've recently experienced the World of Warcraft Classic story is to actually make use of an add-on called Voiceover. And this add-on, I think, is impactful and is paramount in order to really enjoy the story in WoW Classic. What this add-on does is it uses an AI, like voiceover thing, to voice out every single piece of quest text that you get from any NPC. So when you accept a quest or you turn in a quest, it will then just be voice acted for you naturally. And you can then continue on your merry way and go start killing more raptors or quillboars or whatever you want to do, and you will just have this quest text just being voiced over to you, and you're hearing about why you're here, what you're doing, and your impact in this environment. And it can be a really nice way of learning more about the story whilst continuing your questing experience and feeling like you are getting some kind of overarching story going on. Again, zone to zone rather than expansive, whole expansion-wide type of stories. Now, having said that, there are still some really good moments in WoW Classic where you're building up to Molten Core and Ragnaros and what's going on there in the Blackrock Mountains, and as well you have Blackwing Leia and Neltharius, I think it is, or Neltharion, I don't know, there's so many different Nelths throughout WoW's history. But you can have some stories which build up, especially at high level zones, that build up into these big payoff moments with raids or with high-level dungeons, and they do kind of gel together and fit together, and you hear whispers at lower-level zones. You hear whispers of some of these characters or some of these stirrings in these certain raid areas. So you can have some element of payoff, but it's not going to come quite in the form of massive cinematics and hour-long scenes that you're going to get with Final Fantasy XIV. But I do think in this vein, you can get a really great experience of World of Warcraft Classic, and in a way, experience an element of what you experienced with Final Fantasy XIV, if just on a bit of a lesser scale. And I'll hold my hand up, the story in WoW Classic isn't going to be as good as it is in Final Fantasy XIV. That's not what it's about. It's about going into WoW Classic and still getting a nice injection of story and lore, but just in a different MMO and in a different fashion. Now, it doesn't end there. I think that FF14 and WoW are a lot closer in actual interaction and engagement with the game as well. So in Final Fantasy XIV, you feel like you're on a roller coaster at times. You're doing these quests and you kind of feel like, why am I going here? Why am I doing this? What's it all building up to? And you're kind of starting to, you're hearing whispers of primals and you're doing little bits, and then bam, you have this big culminating payoff moment. And then after that, the kind of story dips down just a little bit again, and you kind of reset things and you go and do these random little MSQ quests again. And then you realize that it's actually building up to something again. So you go back up on the roller coaster and you're going back up and up and up and up again. And then you have this big payoff moment. And it's rinse and repeat. And you never fully fall quite far as down after each payoff as your original starting point. Every time you're just that little bit further up and that little bit further up when you do have that reset. And that's very similar actually to how it works in WoW Classic. You're leveling as you're going through your journey. You get these little wins, these little moments of like, oh, that feels nice. And then it sort of resets again, and you have to build back up to that little win. And so yeah, you have things like talent points, which do that. When you get a level, you're like, oh, nice, I got something to empower myself. And then you have to wait for a whole nother level to occur again before you get that feeling again. But also you get this feeling of, because it's so slow and methodical, you have these big moments of, oh, nice, I've got to this level now where I've unlocked this dungeon. I can do this dungeon. I'm at the right level. I can go and do that. When you first hit level like 12 and you can run into Ragefire Chasm, it's a really nice feeling because you're like, right, I'm in my first dungeon. I'm building. I'm progressing. My character is growing. You can have these 2-3 hour long periods where nothing really happens again. You're not really having these big payoffs, and then bam, suddenly you get another great payoff with a new level or a new dungeon unlock, or you complete a zone, you finish every quest in a zone and you feel really good. You get to go turn in 10-15 quests at a time and it feels great. You get a nice new piece of gear. You get your first green or your first blue quality item. So you also get some really nice roller coaster rides in WoW Classic. And it's that kind of ebb and flow that I think is very akin to Final Fantasy as it is to WoW Classic. But that's everything I wanted to say, and now I'll just use this last section of the video to help you set up the add-on if you've never set up an add-on before on WoW. This is a really quick, simple, easy way to do it, and I'll set you up with the add-on that you're gonna want. So first thing is first, if you go onto CurseForge, just type that into Google, click the first link there, and you'd be looking to grab the CurseForge app. Very self-explanatory on how to download CurseForge there. Once you've done that, and you have the app installed, then you can go on to, obviously you'd go on to homepage, World of Warcraft, Classic, and Retail Dragonflight are they're the same game, so you don't have to find WoW Classic specifically. And then you would click Get More Add-ons. Once you do that, you can type in Voiceover, which would be on the Classic drop-down menu, and you can search Voiceover there. Once you do that, you just grab, I mean, they've got, you know, Vanilla, Classic. I think they should somewhat be the same thing, but for safety, probably just get the most recent one, Voiceover Classic. Once you download that, then when you jump into the game, WoW itself, it will just automatically have the add-on installed. So you can go on to World of Warcraft, click on your add-ons down at the bottom left, and it will be here with Voiceover there. Once you're logged into a game and you start your questing experience, when you then engage with NPCs, that's when you'll then see the quest text jumping up on your screen whenever you're turning in a quest.
With Lord Melena's laid to rest, I can finally move on to other...
And there you have it. You can start experiencing the story of Classic WoW and World of Warcraft itself with the use of this add-on Voiceover, and hopefully, you might get a nice appreciation for WoW's story and feel like you're engaging a lot more in the world of Warcraft. Hopefully this was an enjoyable video for you, and I appreciate you watching. See you in the next one.